Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Holon IQ 2022 Global Impact Summits. I'm Vernon Baxter, and I'm the VP for Health at Holon IQ. And as part of our Africa Summit, I'm delighted to be joined today by Abisola Oladapo, Founder and Chief Executive at Agnes Health. Welcome, Abisola.
Thank you so much for having me, Vernon. How are you today?
I'm great. It's wonderful to have you here, Abisola. And before we delve into the session properly, it would be great to hear a little bit about Agnes Health and hear a little bit about why you founded the business and help our viewers to understand a bit more context. And then later on in the interview, we'll talk a bit more about the Africa health market. And then maybe we'll move on to your views and discussion about the kind of future direction of the market. But maybe we could start with your business and help really kind of set the scene for why you created it.
All right. So I'm Abisola, and the CEO and one of the co-founders of Agnes Health, where we're leveraging technology to transform women's health in Africa. So every single year in Africa, millions of women die during pregnancy due to low access to healthcare and low understanding of what the healthcare segment can provide for them. So by using technology and health education, we're providing access to health education and healthcare to every woman, regardless of her ability to read, her ability to write, and in whatever language works for her. All she needs to do is have a mobile phone. And that's essentially what we do at Agnes. This was inspired by my near death experience where I almost lost my baby at birth and the growing population and the high birth rates that we currently have in Africa. Right now, over 100 million women are within the reproductive age across Africa, and this is growing every single year. We have one of the highest birth rates in the world. So, by creating a solution like Agnes, we're able to support women throughout their reproductive years from puberty all the way to menopause and provide health support, health education, health insights, health access that can transform health outcomes for women across the continent.
And Abisola, maybe you can talk a little bit about the current kind of business model for Agnes Health in terms of whether or not it's kind of B2B or B2C sort of arrangement or a blend of each. Maybe you could help our viewers sort of understand.
Correct. So it essentially is a blend, and we call it B2B2C. So we partner with clinics, health entities, public entities who have a focus on public health transformation to reach the actual final user, which are the women. So we are B2B2C.
And obviously this is a global summit series that we're running, and it'd be really helpful to kind of give some context as to the scale of the problem that you're trying to address, and maybe give us a feel for the difference across Africa as a continent, because it's such a obviously vast market.
Sorry, can you repeat that last part?
Well, I suppose to help our viewers get a better understanding of the scale of the problem, but also how it varies regionally across different parts of Africa.
Oh, gotcha. So in terms of the scale of the problem, like I mentioned, there's hundreds of millions of women who are within their reproductive years in Africa. And we do have a very high birth rate. However, we also have a very high death rate of our infants and of our mothers during pregnancy. So there's a huge need to create solutions that are affordable and accessible for every woman to get access to healthcare and to understand how to navigate the healthcare that is being provided. Across Africa, the need is very huge and very acute. However, Western Africa does have the highest rate of maternal mortality and maternal morbidities across the continent. So that's part of why we started in Nigeria, which has the worst maternal health indices all across Africa. We're second only to India in the world. South Africa does have, and North Africa do have better developed health systems, especially in North Africa. However, across the sub-Saharan region of Africa, there is a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of making sure that every single person, whether male or female, has access to health support. And our solution is part of that journey. However, there's still that barrier of having a mobile device, which isn't yet the entire continent.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as part of our wider series, we're seeing a lot of businesses that are almost leapfrogging historic healthcare infrastructure by going straight to people through their device or other means. I mean, it must be, I'd be interested to hear your views on the African market in terms of how, to what extent smartphone usage has permeated and what that kind of potentially means for uptake of direct B2B, B2C sort of models like this.
Right. So right now, the penetration across Africa is, it's not evenly distributed, of course. It's now getting close to 60% in terms of smartphone penetration. However, mobile phone penetration is a lot higher. So you have a lot of people who have access to mobile phones, but they may not have access to the internet. And so what we've seen people do, like we also do at Agnes Health, is we have multiple ways of getting access, whether you have internet or not. That's one way to go about it. Another way is to wait and allow more people start to get on the internet. Every single year, the numbers of people that are getting access to the internet is growing. Internet is getting cheaper, and as large companies start to come into the African market, there's that barrier to internet is starting to really drop. So over the next decade, I see where everyone should be able to afford internet because it's now very affordable across the continent. And that way, even not just having the access to the smartphones, because some people have smartphones today, but are not using the smart elements of the phone
Yeah.
because internet access is so expensive. So there's two things. There's one is the device, the other is the affordability of the access to the web. And as those two things start to get more affordable, or the ability to pay starts to grow across the continent, you will see more connectedness across health and other segments.
And Abisola, before we go on to talk about the, I suppose, the wider market, could you maybe talk about the AI element of your business?
Right. So today, the way we're leveraging AI is to distribute smartly the kind of content that we have on our platform. So we have platform that can cover women throughout their pregnancy from week 1 all the way to 42, and also throughout their puberty. However, every single woman is going to need something very different throughout that period. So our AI engine basically learns from the woman to understand her needs and distribute the appropriate content to her based on those needs.
And obviously it's an evolving area in healthcare and technology. But do you see sort of that element of the business sort of developing further as you sort of enhance?
Oh, of course. So today that's what it does. But over time, and as we start to help more women across more regions, we do plan to explore some predictive ability in terms of predicting health outcomes, predicting health needs and health demands, and also starting to even gain more insights into what may be driving certain outcomes. So we do expect that the AI is started as a very basic engine based on what we're trying to build in the early days, but we do have a vision of it becoming a hub for learning a lot more and being able to help predict even population needs, because now that we're dealing with mothers and children, not only do we have data on the mothers, but we're starting to actually gather data on the children themselves. So over the long term, the next 10, 20 years, we'll have such a bank of data that can really, really provide a lot of insights, not just to the health segment, really, even for like education planning and population planning. So we see where it's starting. We came to solve one problem, but the kind of data that we're gathering and the kind of data that we're harnessing and learning from it could really do a lot. We've been approached by non-health players to see how we can potentially partner, but let's see how things evolve. We got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and actually that would be a great opportunity to, I think, broaden the conversation a little bit, Abisola, from not just the work that Agnes Health is doing, but also to kind of get your views on the I suppose, the state of the healthcare market across Africa. I mean, as I said at the start, this conversation is part of a global series where we're hearing from entrepreneurs and individuals doing amazing things in different parts of the world. And like, if you were to characterize the, I think you've really accurately outlined the demand in the market, but if we were to focus a bit more on the, I suppose, system level adoption of technology or the attitudes to healthcare funding and the direction in that aspect of the market, it'd be great to kind of get your experience and view of the sector as it stands.
So as of 2021, close to 70% of all funding in Africa went to fintechs. About 8% went to health techs. So as of last year, the level of funding that health tech is receiving, even though it's grown astronomically, in 2020, it grew about 81%, right? But still, it's representing less than 10% of the entire funding that's coming into Africa. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And as more investments are made in health and health tech and healthcare as a whole, because you do need the infrastructure that's going to back a lot of these digital health solutions. As those start to grow, you will start to see a lot more interest in that space from a funding perspective. Also from a supply side, you'll start to see more players wanting to enter that market, because one of the biggest questions now is payments. We don't have a very sophisticated payments scheme in any one region in Africa, where we don't have the NHS like the UK has. We don't have a strong insurance system like the US has. So that's one big question about how is that going to evolve in Africa. In Nigeria, for example, they have created a national healthcare scheme, but still health insurance hasn't even reached 10% penetration across Nigeria. So as that starts to grow, then you'll start to see more on the supply side in terms of solutions, in terms of healthcare infrastructure. Their investment is needed. I can't say that enough.
And in terms of the, I suppose, trust and credibility of digital healthcare across the region, how would you characterize that? Because in other parts of the world where we've been speaking to businesses that have similar propositions, there are very varied levels of, I suppose, trust and faith in sort of the ability of digital health to accurately, deliver healthcare services. Is that such an οποίο in Africa, or?
Well, yes. So there is a low faith level for sure. I think, and the way we've solved for that is to build trust over time. So starting with our clients, we usually start at a small scale so we can prove the concept with them and then grow it over time and scale it up. So this is a sector where it's healthcare. So healthcare in general, you can't just release a solution, whether digital or non-digital, without it being proven. So that should be expected in this sector as a whole. It's not going to be just like a fintech where you're just transferring money. This is about people's lives. This is about people's health. So it's important that even health tech players plan with having to prove themselves and continue to prove themselves worthy of that trust of people's lives and people's health. We do see where, McKinsey has put out some reports where Africa is supposed to potentially have the capacity for the highest growth for pharmaceuticals because there's been low penetration so far. So there's huge opportunity. However, if the types of pharmaceuticals that are in the market aren't regulated properly, or then that can lead to other kinds of issues. So yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of the digital health element of it, when you look across your peer group and you see other entrepreneurs and innovators working in different aspects of healthcare, do you feel that you talked a little bit about funding, but in terms of, I suppose, entrepreneurial energy and focus, how would you characterize again Africa's sort of ability to attract and sustain entrepreneurial activity in this part of the market?
So this part of the market, because it's still so nascent in terms of investment coming in that way, I do see where a lot of entrepreneurs want to focus their energy. If they have the option of just choosing whichever sector, they want to follow the money, right?
Yeah.
So right now you see a lot more, the rate of fintech startups is a lot higher than the health tech startups, just because it's easier to attract funding there. However, we do see a lot of health tech startups that have been in the game for a really long time, building a lot of networks, building a lot of resource banks that over the years will start to really show up on the forefront. So I do see this is the health tech game is a long game. It's not a getting to it and 3 years exit. And I think it's one of those where you have to kind of be in it for the long haul. And I do see where that entrepreneurial energy that's looking for a very quick exit may just die out really quickly in health tech, because you will get all of the challenges and all of the questions. And it's just almost like going through I used to work for Medtronic, and we would create medical devices and have to go through a very long and arduous process with the FDA just to get it to market. And sometimes it would take 6-10 years to get it to market. With health tech, it's kind of like that. You have this amazing idea, amazing concept, but until you've proven, and that only comes with time, then you really become a household name. Then you become trusted by all the clinics. Then the diagnostic centers want to work with you, and that just comes with time. So it's the entrepreneurial energy, the kind of entrepreneur that will succeed in health tech in Africa has to be patient and be in it for the long haul.
And in terms of the impact of some of these businesses, your own included, in terms of outcomes, in terms of access, in terms of quality of care, how easy is it to measure in a market where, as you sort of outlined earlier, historically, penetration has been quite poor, and data has maybe not been as established as other markets? I mean, how do you kind of mark yourself and the impact you're having?
So each business has to create its own impact metrics. For us, we're focused on women's health. So we do have certain impact metrics that matter to us. And we then track to those metrics. So for us, it's the survival rates of the women, it's the response time, and many other metrics like that. So for every business, that would look a little bit different. So for example, for pharmaceutical distribution business, it would have to do with delivery times. It would have to do with making sure there's no fake products on their platform and things like that. So it would differ per business. And each business commitment to measuring that would be really important to them in terms of also proving the impact that they're making and the difference that they're making. So for us, we take that very seriously because that's part of what we report to our clients. And it's something that we see could become a differentiator for us over the long term. However, because there isn't a lot of benchmarks, we basically have to come up with what matters to us today and continue to measure to that. And hopefully, maybe some point in the future, we become part of the benchmark. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the great arguments for digitally led healthcare is the ability to kind of grow data infrastructure that can be measured, tracked over a period of time. And I suppose the sort of government-funded healthcare is notoriously difficult to track efficacy and productivity. Whereas I think one of the unifying things we're seeing across the businesses that are digital first or virtual first is the data trail that it leaves and the ability to kind of connect other parts of the business.
Correct. Yeah, you can't. I mean, I feel like it's hard to be in the digital sector and not have a lot of data to show for it. It's just, yeah.
Yeah. And Abisola, if we were to sort of, we talked about health tech been a long game, and Africa been, however, obviously allowing for regional differences, but let's say still been at relatively early levels of adoption and still at relatively low levels of access in terms of to kind of quality care. If you were to take a kind of let's say mid to long term view on the direction of the market, I mean, if you were sort of thinking about the next 10, 20, 30 years of healthcare in Africa, how radically different do you believe the scenario could be from today compared to, let's say, sort of 2040, 2050, when you look out on that kind of really long-term kind of viewpoint?
Right. Looking 25, 30 years out, it could be radically different. for a few reasons. One, access to digital and smartphones is rising very, very quickly. And that means people can now have better access to digital health platforms, which then makes sure that every person, regardless of the location, can now get access to a good doctor, no matter where they are in the world. And even as economies in Africa start to grow, people's ability to pay will also start to grow. So those two elements working together could really drive and create a new picture of what health looks like in Africa, where every person, regardless of race, region, socioeconomic status, education level, has access to basic health care whenever they need it.
And as you say, it's obviously tied to the kind of growth of the economy. But I think if
Exactly.
you look in other markets, so much of the cost of healthcare is tied up in physical infrastructure, in bricks and mortar. And I'm really intrigued to kind of get the view of someone who's building a digital health business that in some way leapfrogs or reduces
Yeah.
necessity.
So, I mean, there are a lot of costs that we can bypass because we're digital first, and we don't have a lot of those traditional infrastructures to think about. However, you can't completely. You're still going to have labs, and you're still going to have the equipment that you need to have there. So there's still some things that you need to that can't go away, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. However, having a large digital infrastructure for healthcare can reduce a lot of costs for delivery, for distributing health products, for distributing health services. I think that part can really, really benefit from the digital savings, and that could then mean the cost of providing care or cost of care can be a lot lower and a lot more affordable and accessible for more people.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting balance when you sort of look over that kind of time frame to what extent, if you were designing a systems, with from not quite a blank piece of paper, but how do you get that mix between digital innovation, but also, actual physical infrastructure, hospitals, nurses, doctors, etc. And it'd be interesting to get your view on, I suppose, the levels of investment that need to go into both the digital entrepreneurial side, but also the kind of what you might call the hard costs of healthcare as well.
Right. I think for the digital and entrepreneurial side, it would be things that foster ease of communication, um,
Yeah.
and especially consultations, things like diagnostics that can be done remotely, which would also reduce waiting times in clinics because we don't really have a lot of clinics anyway, in terms of the ratio of people to clinics. So reducing that pressure on the physical infrastructure, that those are very easy things that the digital system could take on, and that's where the investment should go. But then, tertiary level care, of course, you need to have, physical structures that can handle those things and then allow for the follow-ups to continue digitally. So it really has to be a harmony of both, because if we have that, that would reduce so we would be able to basically take off all the pressure of the initiation of conversations, the initial diagnostics to digital platforms, and then only do what is needed physically and with the physical infrastructures. And that way, even be able to cover more people, hopefully at a cheaper cost. Because,
Yeah,
there's so much inflation around the world these days. So when you say cheaper, I'm like, it's relative.
yeah. I suppose it's about prioritizing the scarce resources of physical infrastructure and trying to kind of minimize the, I suppose the kind of chain and the pathway involved around people and digitizing that to a much greater extent. And just
Right.
as we come to the end of this session, Abisola, I suppose two questions for you. Firstly, again, with that kind of long lens view of what the next 20 or 30 years might look like, I'd love to hear some thoughts about your own ambitions for Agnes Health. And then finally, it would be great to know, having made the shift from Medtronic into running your own startup and dealing in this region and kind of working, if you could sort of impart one bit of advice to anyone else
Mm.
coming into the market or starting their own digitally enabled business. It'd be great to kind of end on some thoughts on that. But yeah, firstly,
Okay.
that question about Agnes Health and its long-term future, and then secondly,
Right. So our mission at Agnes is to transform women's health. And along those lines, one of our key goals is to reduce or completely eliminate preventable forms of maternal death. So far, we've seen that women who are using Agnes are 4 times more likely to survive pregnancy, but we've only supported just a few thousand women. So over the next decade, we'd like Agnes to have reached at least 10 million women over the next decade. And in 30 years, I mean, we can scale that up and see how many hundreds of millions we would have reached by then. And that would be amazing on the Agnes front. In terms of coming from a very corporate background, also working in the US for a large corporate like Medtronic, and coming into starting my own business in Africa, which is a completely different context. Beyond the culture shock of just everything with entrepreneurship, it's you have to make your own luck versus in a very structured environment where there's already a flow, there's already so you just fit into what already exists. As an entrepreneur, you create what that is from scratch. So that can be scary, but it could also provide an amazing opportunity to basically start from a blank slate and create something that's never been created before and approach problems in a way that doesn't have any biases in any particular direction. And that could really be part of what changes outcomes for people who may have otherwise gone neglected. So from a fulfillment standpoint, it's really amazing. And from an advice standpoint, yeah, if you're doing something health tech, just prepare for the long haul.
yeah, yeah, as you say, you've got to make your own luck. It sounds, yeah.
Yeah.
But look, Absol, it's been fascinating to talk to you today, and we want to obviously stay in touch and hear how Agnes Health develops and how it goes about fulfilling its mission. But if I could just finish by saying thank you for participating in the Hull IQ Africa Summit. It was fantastic to hear your views today.
Thank you so much for having me, Vernon. I'm really glad that we have this conversation, and I look forward to seeing how things progress.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.